infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Welcome to another episode of Into the Fray. If you're new here, I hope you're enjoying it enough to head to your podcatcher of choice to rate and review the show. This helps it aggregate across the listening platforms, which will turn into more people willing to come on and share their encounters. If you've been listening for years, I'd ask that you please do the same. Home base for Into the Fray is intothefrayradio.com. There you will find all episodes, blog posts, and get bonus content info. Speaking of that bonus content, on top of the free weekly show, I also produce bonus content for Patreon and Apple Podcast Premium. On either platform, you get all bonus audio episodes and early releases, each one ad-free, of course. Full disclosure though, Patreon has a bit more in the way of perks because of their interface. Over there, you will get video versions of patron-only chats, a private Discord channel, and merch at certain pledge levels. So head to patreon.com/intothefray or your Apple Podcatcher app to sign up for bonus content today. You can find me on the big three social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The Linktree link in each of my bios will take you to all the places you want to venture regarding ITF, including Small Town Monsters documentaries, various ways to listen to the show, Beyond the Fray books, contact info for me, and more. And lastly, and really honestly, most importantly, if you'd like to share your encounter or encounters on Into the Fray, the best way to get in touch is by emailing me at shannon@intothefrayradio.com. And without further ado, let's get to the interview. So on this edition of Into the Fray, I welcome Greg Roberts on with me. He is out of Oregon, and you can visit him on Facebook. He is the Southern Oregon Bigfoot Seeker Facebook page. And of course, that's his investigative name, I guess we should say, right, Greg? Welcome on the show.
Thanks, Shannon. And yeah, that would probably be my identity where it comes to Facebook. The investigation side of it is obviously talking to people about their encounters, looking to see what I can glean from that, looking for consistencies, which, kind of repeat in authentic incidents, and then looking to see when, okay, maybe somebody's trying to hoax me. But the research side of it, in terms of direct contact with them, has really kind of turned more into what I'm about. I'm a little less the investigator and far more be the researcher out in the field, having interactions with them or getting clues on what they're doing.
Now, prior to your first encounter, which we will cover in '84, how much, I mean, you were in Oregon. Were you quite aware of Bigfoot? Were you already interested in Bigfoot prior to this 1984 encounter?
Yeah, you grow up here and you're right in the middle of it. I mean, Willow Creek, for example, is 80 air miles south of us here. And you grow up in what's called Bigfoot country. You hear the stories, you hear people tell, oh, well, I know this guy saw this, or he found a footprint, or, this kind of thing. And, you grow up. And as a kid growing up in it, I read some books, I watched some movies, I was interested in it. I don't know that I was really passionate about the subject at that point, but I was aware of it. And then I turned into being somebody who was a lot of time in the outdoors because I was doing wildland firefighting, I was hiking, I was camping, I was hunting. I was really in our outdoors a lot. And I kind of went back to, I didn't feel like I had had any kind of real experience that I could say, yeah, that was Bigfoot, or maybe it was Bigfoot. I just didn't think that had happened. But I also was not human ego driven to the point where I would say, oh, that's impossible. Those are just wild stories. And a part of that is my dad's side of the family were native ancestry, we're First Nations people. And my Uncle Ted had always told me there are things about this world that we as humans do not fully understand and comprehend. And at the point that he said that, we were out hiking and we were literally camping out at night, just sleeping underneath pine trees on duff piles. We were out really immersed in the landscape. And I remember him telling me that and kind of thinking, well, okay. And so I never scoffed or disbelieved when people had their stories. I just went, well, that's interesting. Nothing's ever happened to me, and I'm out there a lot. I mean, I don't know. That is until I realized actually many years after the fact, I actually had a Bigfoot encounter, and that's what you're referring to in 1984. Only for all the years I grew up around it, the stories I heard about people claiming to see them, finding footprints, I never heard anybody say, I heard one. And that was probably, why I missed the fact that I had an encounter in 84, but didn't really realize it until 2008.
Yeah, so let everybody know what did occur in 84.
Okay, so my buddy Rick Chadwick and I, we went out into the Sky Lakes Wilderness here in Southern Oregon, in the Southern Oregon Cascades, and we were out scouting elk herds. And we went out in the wilderness area, and this was at the beginning of August. You have that big full moon that hits that first part of August. And sometimes you can have a blue moon in August and have a second full. But we were out on the first full one. And our first day out on the hike, everything was great. It was sunny, it was warm, there was lots of wildlife activity. We were seeing a lot of deer and elk. We were thinking this was going to be an exceptional trip and give us a great idea of when the season came up, where exactly we wanted to be. So, second day, as soon as we came out of the tent, we knew something was very different. No birds, no squirrels, no sounds, nothing. It was just this almost oppressively heavy stillness that really felt very unnatural. We kept commenting about the fact that it's so quiet, it's weird. This, we didn't have any way to understand what had to have changed, but we didn't spend a lot of time dwelling on that. We put some miles on. We hiked about 8 miles that day, and we came up and we hit this creek, and we're standing there looking at it, and then we noticed trout down in it, and we go, hey, this is a perfect camp spot. We got the meadow right here, we got the creek with fish. This is it. We're setting up here. So we got camp set up, we got the tent going, got the fire going, caught fish, had fresh fish for dinner, which was awesome. And we roll into the rack and go to sleep, and it was about 2:30 in the morning. I woke up to the sound of every coyote within the area going off. I mean, it was insane. I'd never heard that many coyotes howling all at once the way they were doing it. And I'm listening to it, and it was bright moonlight. I mean, intensely bright. And I'm going, all right. So we got coyotes. I lay back down, because I kind of half sat up, and then I lay back down, and I was just starting to drift back off to sleep. And then I heard the howl. As soon as I heard it, every hair on my body stood straight up. Chills started running. I sat straight up and went, what in God's name was that? And Rick started laughing. He goes, I've been listening to this for about a half an hour. He goes, I didn't know how you could sleep through it. And then the coyotes are going off again. So I realized when I woke up and I heard coyotes going off, the howl was probably what woke me up. And the coyote response is when I'm fully awake and senses aware. And then when I could hear was the coyotes. So that howl was going off. And Rick asked me, he goes, what is that? And I said, I've got no clue. And so we started down the list of possibles. Bear, absolutely not. Cat, absolutely not. Cow, no. Cows don't howl, they moo. And we kept listening to it. And with the coyote response at it, I finally said to him, I said, I think this has to be a wolf. And again, think it has to be because the thought of a Bigfoot making it wasn't even in my mind. And we kept talking about it, the way the coyotes were responding. Well, this thing starts moving off to the north. Gradually over time, we couldn't hear it howling anymore. It kept howling at intervals. The coyotes kept responding to it. Eventually, even when we couldn't hear it anymore, the coyotes were still responding. I thought, man, that is just crazy weird. But I'm like, well, maybe that was a wolf. Okay. We go back to sleep. We get up the next day, and for the rest of the time we were out there, it was exactly like the first day. Sunny, great weather, birds active, squirrels active, deer and elk active. And it was just, kind of stunning how that turned. And again, I didn't really think a lot about what were now obvious tells on day two. It was just, well, that was weird, and put it out of my head. And I honestly didn't even give it a second thought until we went to Alaska on a fishing trip. We do that trip, and this is 5 years later. And then I get to hear wolves really howl. When I heard wolves truly howling out in a forested environment, I knew what we were listening to howling was absolutely not a wolf. And then I was even more puzzled because I had no clue what could possibly make a howl, especially at the volume it was and the way the coyotes responded to it. If it had not been for stumbling onto the old TV show Mysterious Encounters with Autumn Williams, I probably never would have had my answer. But I am a former ski racer. I follow that passionately. And one Saturday night, I was going to watch a live ski race out of Europe. So I tuned into the old outdoor channel ahead of time. And when I tune in, I'm seeing this thing. These people run around the woods and they got, night vision, and they're riding around on mountain bikes and they're talking about being quiet. And I'm going, what are they doing? And at first I thought, are they playing capture the flag? And then they did a recreation of an encounter. And I went, oh, Bigfoot. Okay. So I'm watching this. And then at the end of the episode, they said for more information, to learn more, go to the following websites. They put up Autumn's site, OregonBigfoot.com, and they put up BFRO.net. So I went to BFRO.net first, just because it's a lot shorter and easier. I get to BFRO's site, I start looking around, and all of a sudden on the left-hand column, they've got all of these subsets, and then I see video, pictures, sounds. Sounds? Oh, click. And of course, to this day, I think it still is the first thing you see on their site. Columbiana County, Ohio howl, and the recording that Matt got 10 years later in 1994, mind you. So I'm curious. I hit play on that thing, and as soon as I hear what's recorded, number one, my hair's standing up all over on my body again. Number two, I'm getting chills. But number three, I now know exactly what I heard in 1984 in the Sky Lakes Wilderness in Southern Oregon. This is exactly what I heard, that Columbiana County, Ohio howl. The tone of it, the sound of it, and the way the dogs are responding in Matt's recording is identical in every way to what we heard and how the coyotes would respond. Since then, obviously, I'm aware of at least a half a dozen recordings of similar howls, including one out of West Virginia that's even clearer, louder, and dogs responding again, just like the coyotes would to what we heard. Once I realized that, I was all about it. Once I knew I really did have an encounter, then I started investigating more, and that led me to getting in touch with BFRO because they had scheduled an expedition here in Southern Oregon for 2008. And I wanted to be a part of that, with somebody attending, paying money, doing all of that. But I also said, oh, if you need any help ahead of time in any way, I gave my qualifications, my background, wildland firefighter, hunter, camper, know every bit of this country. Next thing I know, Matt's in touch with me going, hey, would you really be willing to help us scout for locations? And I'm like, sure. And he goes, well, there's this guy that's going to be coming into town. I'm going to get you guys hooked up. And would you please help him look for ideal spots for this expedition? I went, okay, sure, no problem. The guy turned out to be Cliff Barrickman. And that formed a friendship that I love. And Cliff and I are still friends to this day. And Cliff is one of the truly finest humans I've ever met. But we did eventually locate exactly where we wanted to pull that expedition off, and we did. And we had action. We heard howls. I heard my first good deep power wood knock on that expedition. And then, having learned some things from them, I immediately set out scouring the landscape here in Southern Oregon, looking for areas where they would probably be in that I could focus on. And I did eventually find one of those spots in the Southern Oregon Cascades, and then intensely focused my investigation and research work on that area.
So, Greg, do you feel like back in '84 that that creature actually was quite close to you guys in the beginning?
Oh yeah, no. The meadow was kind of this little open area, and there's obviously heavy tree line all around it. When he first was sounding off, when Rick woke up to it, Rick kind of looked out the tent and, was trying to see if he could see anything out there because of the moonlight. He couldn't see anything, but he pointed at the tree line directly across from us that was maybe 100, 200 yards to that point. So that's how close he was.
That, especially with, I can imagine how powerful that must sound. You must have been like, that might be a little too close for comfort. Now, at that point, you didn't know what was maybe making the noise, but regardless, it must have sounded big and powerful. You're going, it had to
Yeah.
be.
And honestly, I have heard that howl again in person since, but I have never heard it at that range with that much power. And the way the sound just carries through the woods. I mean, there's a power to it, and there's also this kind of ringing tone to it that echoes out through the woods. And, as we get more into this, I'm going to explain why humans trying to howl for Bigfoot is actually a mistake. And I've learned that now over the years, because there are things happening within that howl no human is going to be able to replicate. And I don't care how big you are, like Bobo, or I am at over 6'4", 300 plus pounds, even me putting as much power and projection as I can into my voice doesn't come anywhere close to these.
So you're saying they know right off the bat that you're faking the funk,
Yep.
and there's no way to communicate with these things in that way. Yeah, and I definitely want you to get into that. So
I was just going to say, not howling, trying to howl and sound like one, you're busted as soon as you do it. They know what you are. And in fact, you watch all of these TV shows, you watch all these documentaries where people go out and do that. If they get a response to it, they only get one and they never get a close approach.
Now, once you came across this recording, this Ohio howl, did you send it to Rick and go, listen to this, dude? Like, I mean, this is what we heard.
Yeah, I made him aware of it, and Rick was like, absolutely. He said, that was it. And it's one of those things that, it literally changes your paradigm about so much. And I went back to what my uncle had told me. There are things about this world that we just do not know or can understand.
Now, tell me about the trees that you found a few years after that occurrence.
Yeah, and as the byproduct then of getting into the subject and learning more about what to look for, I realized I'd actually had a second Bigfoot experience. And this happened while I was out elk hunting with my uncle about this time of the year, in fact. Cloudy, gray, very dark day. And he and I went to hunt this area that had elk in it, and we split up. And I moved off down towards this creek, and I was following the creek up, and then I saw this big game trail coming up down towards the creek, and I went, okay, I'm going to start walking back up that. And I get to the top, and I see this fir tree that about 4 to 6 inches in diameter, and I'm looking at the top of it, and the top is gone, and all I can see at about 8 feet off the ground is wood fiber twisted in a spinning type shape, like something wrenched the tree and twisted it with so much force. And I'm looking at that, I'm going, that's the craziest thing I have ever seen. But I didn't really do a lot of investigation at that point. I just went, okay, that's really unusual. I've never seen anything like that, but I'm after elk. So I start pressing up that game trail, and then I'm walking along, and then I look up, and once again, another fir tree about 4 to 6 inches in diameter and about 8 feet off the ground. Top's gone. That spun look to the wood fiber. And I'm going, whoa, two? Then I start paying a little bit more attention, and I get up, and when I got to the third one, I'm looking at that, and then I looked back, and I realized I could see both of the ones that I had just come past, and they stuck out like a torch, like a neon light in that, against the dark backdrop, as dark as the conditions were, that nice, good, clean wood fiber, not aged at all. It was bright against the background. That third one, I reached up and touched it, and I had sap all over my fingers, and I went, this just happened. That's not wind damage. That's not snow damage. That's not another tree coming down onto it. The top is gone, and that's twisted. What on earth would have done that? I started following that trail up, and then it dawned on me. I kept finding more of these at regular intervals. It dawned on me something blazed this trail. What would have done that? And again, I wasn't thinking Bigfoot, because again, at that point, I really didn't have any clarity that I'd had a Bigfoot encounter, or that they would have even done this. Never even heard it discussed. Tree breaks, structures, never heard about any of that. I'm walking along, and the trail starts going up on this ridge that runs off to the north side of Oak Mountain. And I'm looking at this ridge, and it's big black timber. And I'm standing there, and I'm looking up at that. I'm thinking, do I really want to go up there? Because I'm not finding any fresh elk sign yet. And I'm standing there, and whatever would be on that can look down and see me in full view, see me standing there with my high powered rifle. And I'm standing there just looking and trying to think, do I want to make the effort? And then I hear, like, crystal clear, don't come up here. I'm like, that's weird. And I'm looking around, and I'm looking for people. And I actually took a couple steps forward in the direction of the ridge, trying to get a better look at this edge of this logging cut that I was looking into, just to see if I might spot somebody. When I made those 2 steps forward, again, this time heavier and with a real sense of, I guess I'm going to say, forcefulness, do not come up here. That freaked me out. I'm like, okay, I'm not coming up there. And I turn, and I start working around the edge of the bottom of the hill and following this old logging cut area. I met up with my uncle, and I said, hey, did you see anybody else in here? He goes, no. He said, you and I are the only ones in here. And I said, yeah, that's kind of what I thought. And he goes, why? And I go, well, I thought I heard somebody talking. And he goes, oh, well, he said, maybe somebody came in from the north. I don't know. He says, I haven't seen anybody. I haven't heard any vehicles. And I went, okay. So Didn't think a whole lot about that. I just thought that was odd, and I thought maybe I just imagined the whole thing. Going forward, as I'm meeting other people in the community, I met a gentleman by the name of Richard Hucklebridge, and you may know Rich. I mean, he's down there in Southern California, and you guys may have crossed paths, but in that 2008 BFRO expedition up here, Rich was a part of that. And I had a discussion with him, and he brought up telepathing, them sending telepathic messaging. And I told him, that may have happened to me, and relayed what I just told you. And he looked at me, and as soon as I got done, without any equivocation, he said, "That is exactly what happened to you. You got telepathed."
Oh, is there, because as you were telling the story, maybe at that time you weren't even 100% sure of this, but had you second guessed yourself as far as whether it was in your head or not? Like, did you feel like, oh, well, because you did ask your uncle, hey, did you hear anybody else talking out here? So at that point, it wasn't actually clear then if it was in your
Right.
head or not.
Again, it was another one of those confusing things that was kind of like, well, that's weird. I've heard people down here go, sometimes I swear I hear voices out there, but then I think it's just the wind or it's just this. And
Mm-hmm.
sound can carry. I have literally listened to humans carrying on a conversation from nearly a mile away.
Right.
So, I really didn't know what to make of it, but here's what I do remember: how deep the sound of that voice was. And then when I made those two steps, an ominous, threatening quality to that second message of "Do not come up here." I was like, wow. I mean, I'm thinking, if I just imagined that, the how and the why would I have imagined it that way? A lot of things just didn't make sense. But then I talked to Rich, and he was 100% certain, and then he explained it all, and I was like, well, okay, so chalk that one up. That was another Bigfoot experience that I had before I was ever even really truly aware I had had them. So I'd had a great encounter with the howl, and then the tree breaks and this telepath thing. I was like, wow, it kind of made me think how many people who live here have these kind of experiences that they just pass it off as, well, that was weird or that was a strange sound, but they never really dig deeper, or they never find something to make them go, wait a minute, now that matches up. Well, what? And so that's how I kind of, this whole thing really begins, but it also explains where I come from as I do my research, because I'm not out there trying to be the guy to prove to the world they exist. I know they do. Whether you want to believe it or not doesn't matter to me at all. I don't care. I know they do. I know I haven't misidentified anything. So that pushes me into to try, okay, so if I'm having some encounters and things happen, can I have it happen more? What other things can I learn? And that's always been, the focal, my vision point, my perspective as I go out there looking into things, is it's always about trying to increase my knowledge and gain understanding of what they are and what they're doing.
It's an interesting point that, and you've heard plenty of these stories, as have I, when people actually physically hear them try to speak, like the samurai chatter, it's a little bit off.
Hmm.
It's more like a deaf person trying to speak, and it's not
Right.
anything bad saying that. It's just how they sound. But then in the telepathic communication, they speak quite clearly, and it's more
Yes.
proper English, right? They can spit that stuff out pretty well.
Yeah. And I've had two telepath incidents, and I will talk about the second one. But both of them, the absolute clarity, it's like proper English. There's no ambiguity. There's no anything that sounds like gibberish or garbled. It's crystal clear, and it's very concise.
Right. And why would a simple, quote unquote, simple ape in the woods be able to speak such proper English, whether it's out loud or not?
Yep. And even when you can teach them English, it's very basic rudimentary words.
Mm-hmm.
They're far more successful at literally doing sign language. Gorillas, chimps, orangs, you can watch examples of all of them getting very fluent in sign language, but even the best, I'm going to say educated, because that's the one word I can think of, the best educated of our fellow great apes out there in the gorillas and the chimps and the orangs, when it comes to really forming and projecting vocal words, no.
So, what was the next incident then for you?
I would say the next incident then would obviously, behind the tree breaks would have been what happened in that 2008 BFRO expedition here in Southern Oregon. So we heard howls. I got to hear my good first deep power tree knock, so that was a really awesome experience. But the first one that I was really elated by was when I found my research area that I still actively work to this day. Ironically, my wife and I were on our first date, and I was exploring an area that I'd been into quite a bit as a deer and elk hunter. And we're literally just driving down this road, this spur road, and we're kind of cruising along. And I'd driven past the spot once, but then on the way back out, we turned around, we were coming back out. There's a big high cut bank above the road, and then there's kind of this ditch along it. And I'm driving, and I happen to look in the ditch, and there is a perfect footprint right there. And I immediately stop the truck. I jump out. I'm all excited. I'm looking at this thing, and it's one of the best footprints I've encountered being out. And, wife gets out and she's looking at it, and I go, look at that. And she goes, whoa. She goes, that's a footprint. And I said, right. But I'm looking at it, and, we're looking at a footprint that was nearly 18 inches from back of the heel to the front of the toe crowns. It was 13 inches wide on the toe crowns, and it's 6.5 inches across in the heel.
Wow.
And I was just blown away by it. And I mean, driven down into the dirt. It was a good 3 inches deep, but it was just one. And I was puzzled by the fact it's just one. Well, right next to it, there was a bunch of rocks and sticks. This footprint was in a spot of loose soil. And the longer I sat there and looked at it, kept looking at the cut bank and looking at this, all of a sudden I became aware of, I think that thing jumped off the top of the cut bank and landed down here next to the road. And I tell the wife that, and she goes, really? And I said, yeah. And then I said, here's another reason why I think that. I started thinking of all these reports I read about encounters when people first saw the Bigfoot. It was crouched down next to the road. So when they first see it, at first they're thinking it's a bear, maybe it's something else. And all of a sudden, this thing stands up on 2 feet and takes off. And I said, so right next to the road, landed on this ditch, and I'm talking to her, and she's looking around. All of a sudden, she goes, honey. And I said, what? She goes, look at the smudges over here. And she had been walking back and forth looking at this, and all of a sudden she realized there's what she called smudges. There were impressions to the left and to the right. And as we kept looking at it, it suddenly dawned on us, these are knuckles. This thing jumped down off that cut bank, came down, landed, put its hands balled up into a fish shape out to the side when it landed. And then it stood up. Then where did it go? Well, the road that we're on, no way you're going to see tracks there. It was cinder rock. It was well graveled. I mean, you couldn't see even cattle, deer, elk tracks, and they're all over the place in there. So we're looking, and I start walking down the road, and then the bank, the distance from the top of the bank to the road is gradually getting closer. And I look, and all of a sudden I realize I'm looking at a pathway going up the bank. And I get up there and there's impressions and I start trying to stride it off. And I told my wife, I said, I can't do this. I can't equal the length of this stride from this impression here to this impression here. And I said, but I do know, again, on the general shape, this is going uphill and it's going right up this trail. And it's this lower point here where if you just side hill it, it's pretty easy to negotiate that and get back up on that upper level. Once we found that, once I identified that, I was like, this is my spot. This is where I'm really going to start turning over the countryside and get to know every detail about this that I can. And that is my research area to this day. I've taken a few people into it. A name I think most people might be a little more familiar with, Bart Catino. I took Bart in there. Bart's been in there with me a couple times. First time I took him in there, Bart said, this is the best habitat I have seen outside of the Olympics. And I said, right. And Bart was also on that 2008 BFRO expedition. So that's how we met. But over the course of time in there, I knew they were in there and I started paying attention to why would they be there. 6 different types of berries, lots of deer, lots of elk, lots of manzanita, lots of secondary thing, grasses, forbs, squirrels all over. I realized what I was in was a perfect buffet to them with lots of heavy cover, with lots of water. And I just started focusing in on that spot and I kept finding footprints. I was finding tree breaks that they were doing to indicate trails. So I just kept working that thing. And I got to the point where even at night, I could negotiate that mountain and could see things with clarity to know, okay, something's changed here. But I was frustrated because I wasn't having encounters with them directly. I was howling, no response. Beating on trees, no response. And finally, one night, just kind of out of frustration, I just decided I've got to quit doing the thing that everybody is supposed to do. I want to do something they wouldn't expect me to do. And what I decided to do was, on this mountain, there is one Forest Service road that you drive up. There's a gate, keeps you from getting to a lookout area up on top and to preserve some other areas. But I thought, I'll just start at that gate and walk back down the mountain down to the campsite that I have down below. So call up this friend of mine and I go, hey, want to go out and have some fun? He's like, sure. So I explained to him exactly what we're going to be doing. And he wasn't a believer in any way. He just, hey, I'm up for adventures in the woods. Let's do this thing. So Jeff and I go out. I have him take me up. And again, this is August, by the way. And this is going to be August of 2011 now. And he drops me off, big, full, bright, moonlit night, very much exactly the conditions that we had in 84. So I get up there, have him drop me off. I sit there at the gate and just waited a half an hour. Just kept focusing on the things around me that I could hear. Did not have a flashlight, didn't have a pack, didn't have anything. And after a half an hour, stand up and I start walking down that mountain, walking down that road like I don't have a care in the world. And I hadn't gone but a half, maybe 3/4 of a mile, and I start hearing movement on the hill above me to my left and realized something's cruising along through the woods. And so I stop, it stops. It's that classic shadowing behavior. You move, they move. You stop, they stop. And when I really fully was aware, okay, I'm being paralleled right now by something, I was like, okay. So I keep walking and then I turn real quick and look, and I'm never going to forget what I saw. looking around that big old fir tree at me. I had done my research. I wanted to be prepared when I saw one. I wanted to know, how big can I expect it to be? How am I going to look compared to this? You know, a lot of things. I got myself prepared for the moment. And one of the best things I ever found was there is a artistic rendering of an encounter that a soldier had on Fort Lewis on the base with a Bigfoot, and they drew a picture of this guy standing in front of the Bigfoot he encountered to try and give scale and dimension of what he saw as he saw it. So based on that, I kind of knew it's going to be like me going back to the little kid days looking at a big adult man. It's going to kind of have that feel. But still, when I turned and saw what was looking around that fir tree at me, the sheer size of the shoulder down through the arm, what I could see of the upper torso, then the head, looking around that tree at me, I'm never going to forget it, because it wasn't something that filled me with fear. It was just, oh my gosh. You think you know how big they are, and you're mentally thinking, okay, I'm ready for this moment. And then when it actually happens, even when you think you're really ready for it, for me, it was still that sense of astonishment and awe to fully, just for what I could see, get a representation of exactly how big they are. And I was just blown away. Well, he ducks back behind the tree, and I was like, okay, that's really cool. Now I want to see if he's going to keep following me. So I keep walking off down the road. And then I would do that stop and turn, and then he'd always do the duck back thing. And I was like, this is unbelievable. Finally. And I was so excited at this point. I was really pumped up, jacked up, because I did it. I made contact right there. And so I start walking off, and then all of a sudden I realize, okay, I'm hearing him. Now I'm hearing something else. And I did that quick turn again. And when I did, he goes behind a group of trees, but I saw a smaller one duck in behind some manzanita brush. And I went, ooh, two. If that's a smaller one, so that's got to be like a juvenile. And now I'm elated. I was going, I did it. Didn't act like a normal human in the woods. No flashlight, no nothing, just strolling off down the road, and they couldn't stand it. They had to come really check me out and figure out, what was I really doing? Well, then I start moving off down the road, and then I hear a big pop and crack to my right, and I turn, and there's a head sticking up over this manzanita. And as soon as it realizes I'm looking at him, ducks down in the manzanita. So now I'm being paralleled off both sides of the road. And it just, I don't even know how to describe, Shannon, how both elated, excited, thrilled, adrenaline. I mean, all of this is surging through, because I felt like I had done something that I really hadn't heard other people talk about being able to do. Literally draw them in and create an encounter, but not hostile. They clearly were checking me out, watching me. So I'm going along, and then I stop and look back down to the right in that manzanita patch just to see if I could see it again. Well, the one on the right, yeah, I saw it again. And there was another head, a smaller one, and they both ducked down. And then I realized, okay, so I've got these two, walk, stop, look. The other two are still, I could see movement. I didn't really see them, but I saw enough movement to know the two on my left are still there. So I'm going, now I've four. And I was pretty sure two of them were adult and two were juvenile, just based off what I was able to see when I could see it. So I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I've heard people talk about, a Bigfoot. And I'm like, no, there's more than just one. So I start walking again. And that's when I started getting the test. And when I say the test, I think it was the kids. I'm almost positive it was the kids. They start soft tossing pebbles and little pine cones over me to land in the road in front of me. I never felt like it was done with hostile intent. I felt like it was kind of, yeah, let's just do this to this guy, see if we can mess with him. And they start doing this, and I finally turn around and go, I know what you're doing. I'm not going to run. I'm just walking off down the road. So I keep walking off down the road, and this keeps happening. I keep getting these little pebbles and little pine cones coming over my shoulder, landing in the road in front of me. And I'm just like, none of this was scary and made me want to run. I just understood what they were doing. It's like having your obnoxious little brother tagging along behind you doing stuff to kind of try and get to you, and provoke you into something. That is exactly the feeling I had. So I keep walking off. They keep shadowing me. They keep paralleling me. And then there's a big bend in this road. And when you come through that bend, you're going to be in full sight of the campsite. As soon as I hit that, they were gone. I heard them move off. And I get back down to the bottom. My buddy's sitting there, and I come into camp, and I had to have this huge grin on my face. And he goes, what happened? And I tell Jeff, I said, hey, you're not going to believe this, but here's what wound up happening. And he's like, no way. And I said, yeah, they followed me right until I was coming through the bend where you'd be able to see me coming down the road. That's when they scattered. So I start telling him all my details about the Bigfooting and everything. And again, this guy wasn't a believer. He was just, hey, let's go have a night, camp out, let's have fun in the woods. So I'm getting him all up to speed on this. And he's like, he says, I never would have thought any of this was ever real. And I said, yeah, there's a lot of people who never think any of it's real until it happens to them. I said, and honestly, I was one of those guys. I didn't disbelieve, but I didn't really have belief until it happened to me. Well, we're talking, and all of a sudden, I'm facing to our west, and where my campsite's at, there's a little dip through it on the other side, and then it goes up this bank, and right on the other side of that was a logging reprod area full of all kinds of food sources for them. And it was another reason for camping where I did. There was a lot of cover right there, but we're real close to a food source. There's water down below us. I figured I was on a natural travel path. So let's have my camp right here. And I'm sitting there talking to him, and I'm looking to the west. And I swear, when I first saw it, looked like two dim tail lights in a spot where two dim tail lights shouldn't be. And I'm staring at that, and I'm going, what am I looking at? That is so, out of place. Of just going, what? And then the tail lights blinked. And then it was like, oh. And that was my first eye shine encounter. Realizing what it is, what it looked like, and looking at it for the first time. And it was just, whoa. And I literally jumped to my feet. Immediately, the eyes disappear. And I was like, oh my gosh. And Jeff's now turned, going, what? And I said, right over there. There was a Bigfoot standing there. I saw his eyes. I saw them blink. And I described exactly what I just described to you and what I saw. And he's like, no way. And I said, yeah. And I think I ruined it by jumping up and yelling. And I don't know, maybe he'll come back. So we sit down, we start talking again. And this has been maybe 10, 15 minutes of elapsed time. And I look up, and all of a sudden I realize I can see one little faint, dim red glow back there. And I went, okay. So I'm watching, and then the one becomes two again. And I'm realizing, okay, now he's totally right there looking right at us. And I told Jeff, I go, he's back. Look. He made the mistake I made of rapid movement, turning and jumping up and looking. And of course, he disappeared. And I go, no. We can't do it like that, man. When I tell you it's back, turn your head very slowly. Don't move your body. And then bring your eye, keep looking up until you actually see it. Don't move. Don't yell. Don't do anything except a nice slow movement. He goes, okay. And then we're talking again. And I'm not sure how much more time elapsed from there, but I just remember looking up and realizing, okay, he's back. I'm seeing it again. And I tell Jeff, all right, real slow, turn your head to the right, and then just keep lifting your eye gaze up until you see the red things. And he did it. And when he did it right, then he got to see it. And I'll just never forget, all of a sudden I hear him go, "Oh my God." Right there. That's a Bigfoot standing right there. What else? Red eyes in the darkness. And I knew what it was because I'd been reading all about people having seen eye shine. So when I see it the first time, I knew exactly what it was because it perfectly matched all the descriptions I had heard about eye shine. Well, he stood there, he watched us, and then I think he probably just got bored because he turned and he moved back to the west, heading towards that reprod area. And I was pretty sure the rest of the family's out there and their food gathering or whatever. And I didn't want to press it. I had already accomplished something I don't know how many people could ever do. So I was just real good, just sitting there in camp. I didn't want them to think I was going to be chasing them or doing anything like that. We just sat there. We get up the next morning, we get back home, and Jeff said, "That was the most mind-blowing thing I've ever had happen in my life." And I said, "Right?" And I said, I thought I was totally ready for the moment. And then the moment was even bigger and more incredible than anything I ever could have imagined. With that having happened, I developed a pattern of knowing exactly when they were going to be on that mountain, when I needed to be there. And over the course of time, more and more direct encounters started happening with them, where I could see them. I would definitely hear them. I'd find their tracks. But what I quit doing, I quit trying to draw them out in any way. I started going out there and being more the observer and just sitting and listening. And I don't think enough people doing this, going out, looking into it, trying to have encounters with them. I don't think they do that often enough. They don't return to the same areas. They don't give them a chance to get to know you. And they certainly don't just sit and be still and be in the environment and just listen. And by doing that, I began to realize their way of communicating and our attempts to replicate it. That's where I first began to realize our attempts at it may actually be thwarting it, because they do the tree knocks and they do the rock knocks and they do the sounds, but it's different and they come in patterns. And especially the tree knocks, the wood knocks, the rock knocking, and even things like leaving stacks of rocks or using rocks. There is a 3-1 code embedded in everything they do. You get 3 of one thing. 3, for example, whoops. Roop, roop, roop. And then there's always one that replies off to the side or whatever, and it's more of a roop, and it's like an acknowledgement. And then I started thinking, okay, so there's a pattern in communication here. There's a code. We've got our Morse code. This 3-1 code to them is pretty significant because it keeps repeating. And it doesn't just happen in my research area. I listen to all these recordings taken. Shannon, think about how many times you've heard bang, 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 wood knock, silence. And then all of a sudden, one knock off in the distance gets recorded, regardless of who's doing it. 3 howls, 3 whoops, 1 response. This 3-1 code that they use is universal to them. It's not just something my Bigfoot family clan is doing here in Southern Oregon. It's happening everywhere.
Now, Greg, do you implement something, just really quickly before it slips my mind, because it will? Do you implement things like trying to wear the same clothing every time, or do you feel like they recognize you anyway?
No, they definitely recognize me, and I'm going to tell you how I absolutely know. And I've told Cliff this, and Cliff kind of scoffed it. I don't. I had a Chevy Colorado pickup for years, literally from the time I started contact with this family group until 2 years ago when it finally wore out and I had to quit driving it. It reached the point that when I would pull up with that pickup and they were right there, they would whoop at me or they would tree knock at me to acknowledge the fact they knew I was there. I learned to finally approach, roll my windows down in the truck, regardless of the time of the year, roll the windows down in the truck, shut the truck off, and then just sit. And then I'd get the tree knock or I'd get the whoop, and then I'd just do a whoop back in response, let them know I was there. When you communicate like they do, then they kind of understand that, oh, okay, this guy is definitely getting on our same page. He's understanding how to communicate. You become far less of a threat. So they are more prone to carry on their regular life with you around rather than go into defense mechanism and go silent and quit doing what they do. And that was something else that I also learned. With humans, we have the God human complex. We think we're the masters of everything on earth, even though we're truly not. But we go barging out there into the wilderness like we do. And it's very off putting to all forms of wildlife, but it's especially off putting to something that has a deep sense of intelligence, but a high degree of avoidance of potential danger and is already very suspicious of humans because I think they universally see us far more as potential trouble than a potential friend. And you have to be able to diffuse that in them. And so that's my explanation for all these loggers, hunters, woodsman type who go, I've been in these woods 50, 60 years and I ain't seen nothing. This is all a bunch of bull crap. Those kind of people that generally say that are also almost universally, in my experience, really off-putting individuals even to other humans. They're usually loudmouth, braggadocious, arrogant, you can't tell them a thing kind of people. And you drop a gun on them for hunting season or a sidearm for protection, and they just project this air of ego and arrogance. And even if it's not that, I watch humans in the woods. I study humans in the woods a lot, and none of these people have ever known I was there and I was watching them. You can spot the people who are carrying weaponry of some sort, and you can spot the people who aren't. And the people who aren't react to everything. Oh, what was that? You can literally see the head movements. You can see them snapping around. You read how very uncomfortable they are. The people who are armed are not nearly as reactive to every sound. They carry themselves far differently. You can watch it happen. Now, if I, as a human being, can read that, these things absolutely read it. Being masters of concealment in all kinds of ways, they will choose direct encounters with humans. They will choose it to happen. Things like road crossings, that type of thing. Now, that's far more up to chance, but the people who talk about being out in the woods and having encounters, the people that I start talking to and asking, what were you doing? Did you happen to have any firearms on you? I start drilling down into things like that because I want to see what kind of image they were projecting to the universe. And the ones who were not projecting as a threat, the encounters would be a little bit more, I will say, more peaceful, but still dramatic. Hunters, the encounters become, as a rule, much more aggressive in the terms of really letting them know I'm here, tree shaking, throwing things at them. And I mean throwing things with intent, big things, rocks, big tree limbs, growls, snarls. I mean, pushing you out, letting people know you're not welcome to be here. Me going out, I've always taken the approach to be as anti-human as I can and, be respectful of them. I had another friend had me on his podcast, and I said, think of it this way. It's like you go to somebody's home, you barge in their front door, you immediately start tearing up their living room, you're making a bunch of noise, you're being an absolute jerk. Do you think you're going to be welcoming of somebody like that who barges right into your living room without even knocking on the door, just barges in and starts behaving that way? And he goes, oh, God, no, absolutely not. And I said, exactly. These are powerful, intelligent, sentient beings that they could destroy any human they want to, and yet they don't. But when you have these kind of people reacting this way in their home, in their environment, their first reaction to it is they're just flat going to avoid it, period.
So you admit then that if you had been on that service road in 2011 and you had had your boomstick, right? You had been armed, rifle, handgun, whatever, that you may have had a very different experience. Because you admit that
Yeah,
you weren't scared or nervous at all. You were
no,
enjoying it.
yeah, no. And that's, again, that's a very important point to make. I was zero threat to them, and I was behaving in a way that I guarantee you they had likely never seen a human behave that way in the dark. But again, I knew that mountain. I've been in the woods in the dark a lot. I was a former wildland firefighter. I've been, on hikes. I've been on hunting trips where, oops, I got caught out in the dark. Being in the woods at night, actually, it doesn't frighten me at all. It truly doesn't. And I don't know if that makes me exceptional or what, but I've been raised there. I'm used to being there. And not to toot my own horn, but again, I don't know how many people really go out and develop a comfort level of being in the woods at night the way I did. And part of that was, because of things I was doing for work or just even for enjoyment. But when you're raised with a Native American ancestry, you're also raised in a way not to fear anything about the natural world. You understand it and you learn how to live in it and accept it and not be fearful of it.
So that same scenario, you're on that service road, you're armed, maybe you end up having not so light an area of an encounter. We have all heard those encounters where they go sideways and it
Mm-hmm.
ruins the woods for somebody. Do you then think that you would have been marked by them? You would have been recognized as
Yeah,
one of these other people, and that would have ruined future contact for you?
without any question. And the other thing, I hear people talk about, oh, I would have shot the thing. And you see even TV shows based on the whole idea of shooting one. While I have never ever looked at one down the barrel of a firearm or even a handgun, I have talked to guys who had the experience of looking at one through a rifle scope and thinking prior to that moment, yeah, I'd be able to shoot one. Then they had it in the rifle scope, and then came I can't pull the trigger. This thing is too close to human.
Now, telepathy, of course, is one of the strange things that is attributed to some of these Bigfoot reports. What about some of the other things? I'm sure that you've heard them. Have you ever come across anything else in
Hey,
all of your years in the woods that might be attributed to this other side of Bigfoot?
the telepathy part, I want to get back to that because there was a second telepathic incident. And this one, unlike the first one, the second one was really cool. I was just sitting there on a log one night and just listening to them do their thing. And I was, kind of starting to get tired. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. It was just starting to get light off out in the horizon. And I'm thinking to myself, man, it's been fun. It's been a cool night. I think I'm just going to go. And all of a sudden, about the time I thought that, then I hear the voice again. I mean, I'm saying again, I'm hearing this voice that I know I'm hearing it or believing I'm hearing it, and it's a spoken voice. And this time there's a lot of warmth to it, and it tells me, don't go, stay. You will like what happens. I'm thinking, oh, really? Yes. Do not go, stay. You will be happy. Fine. Sat my butt right back down on that log, and 20 minutes later, I got to hear something for the first time. I've actually heard at least, oh man, a half a dozen times, maybe even more. I mean, it's hard to put it all together here, but I heard what I call the dawn greeting. And it also, I think it kind of helps really position where the whole family group is for everybody. But as dawn is really now starting to light the sky up, all of a sudden I hear a howl, probably maybe a half a mile directly due north of me. That howl goes off. Then I hear another howl to the northwest. I hear another howl to the southwest that I could barely hear, but I could hear it. And then coyotes start going off. And I was like, whoa, now that's really cool because it was like, okay, I'm here. Here's the big howl. Here's the response from here. Here's the response from here. Big howl repeats. Hear the response to the northwest. Hear the response to the south. Then I hear a response coming from off to the east of my position. And again, the coyotes are all going off. And I was like, okay. When I heard that, I began to have some understanding about what we call the Columbiana County howl is and its purpose behind it. Every time you hear it, every time you hear recordings of it, it is a very loud sound and it's got projection, meaning it's designed to cover distance. It's never just a Bigfoot. They are in family groups, and I don't know why that would be such a shock to people because every other great ape on the planet, humans, gorillas, chimps, orangs, I don't care what it is, even the medium to small size apes, they're in family groups. These things are in family groups, and they can get spread out in the course of foraging, spread out in a human sense, not in their sense, in a human sense. When the time to pull the family back together happens, the dominant male of the group, and in my family, I just call him Big Daddy, he will start howling to let everybody know exactly where he is and where he wants everybody to come to. And I truly believe that is what they're doing just based on now having heard that. So I was getting ready to leave. They knew it. They invited me to stay to hear, okay, let's get everybody together here and let's settle in for the day where we know we're protected and got shelter. So I got to hear this. And then once the dawning hit on me, what's going on here? Then it was like, okay. So that kind of brought everything back full circle. And then it just kind of reinforced in my mind as a human, I can't even make that sound with that amount of projection, volume, make the trees ring, that kind of thing. The other thing that I had been missing because I've had people tell me about it and I don't recall it really happening to me is a buzzing sensation or a feeling like sound passing through them. But we know exactly what it is. And research has been done on these howls that have been recorded. There is no doubt they are producing infrasound. As a human being, you will never produce infrasound, and it's another dead giveaway to them that when you're out there howling, the lack of infrasound will tip them off and they know you're not them or somebody else not in their family group in the area. They know it's a human and it's not a Bigfoot. You're busting yourself doing it. So quit trying to howl like them. You're never going to do it. You're never going to fool them because there's too many things missing, and especially that infrasound. So now having a better sense of how they communicate out over distance, then I realized as I got to thinking about it and listening to them, whoops, whistles, things like that, softer sounds they do when they're in proximity to each other. Tree knocks, rock knocks, they do that in proximity to each other to communicate in close distance. They don't do that to communicate over long distance. Then obviously you get into the whole subset of other vocalizations that they'll make, and a lot of that will be due to stress, anger, those types of things. There's a whole nother range of sound there. But I mean, just the generally more peaceful, this is them going about their life with no stresses on them. those sounds, we can't replicate it. It just, there's no human way to do it.
Now, have you ever tried to go out there and speak to them, whether it was out loud verbally or in
Yep.
your mind, and have something happen in response?
We, yeah, actually, that's one of the other key components of what I do. I do go out there, and before I do anything else, I'll get out there and I'll just sit down. And then I start talking out loud quietly, going, "Hi, it's me. I'm just out here to hang out with you guys. You know it. You know I'm no threat to you. So, hey, if you're around and you want to make yourself known, be happy to hear from you." And then just periodically going, "Hey, it's me. It's Greg. You know me." I honestly think they know me even if I didn't have to say anything, but I just like to reiterate the who I am and come in peace aspect. Do I believe these things are totally peaceful at humans at all time? No. There's definitely more than enough examples to let you know that things can go horrifically bad. But do I think you are at far less risk from them if they know, and I mean really know, you are zero threat? Absolutely. Do I ever totally let my guard down and act like I want to go up and hug Harry Henderson? Absolutely not. I give them their space. I try not to intrude upon it. I am very respectful in all ways about approaching them and then interacting with them. And one way I'll really illustrate that was one night I'm just sitting there and I'm listening to this activity going off, and I'd been hearing some periodic tree knocks, and they're moving up through this big deep ravine on my mountain. And I'm just sitting there listening, and I'm sitting on this log, and I heard what sounded like a rat behind me scurrying around. And I thought, okay. And I kept being more focused on what I was hearing out to my front in the area of the canyon. And I'm just sitting there, and all of a sudden, I felt like I was being enveloped by something. I just went, oh, I knew something was there. I felt it, and I was like, okay, something's with me. And I wasn't really sure yet what it was. Then I heard the breathing, and the breathing, I say Darth Vader because I kind of want to give people a yardstick as to what it might sound like. But even then, that wasn't exactly right. It was this heavy, deep inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And I go, oh man, I knew exactly who was behind me. I didn't even have to turn around. I knew it was the dominant male of the family group, and he's standing right behind me, looking at me sitting there. And I just sat there and I said, real quiet, "Daddy, I know you're there. And I know you could finish me in a blink if you wanted to. But you also know I'm no threat. And I'm just sitting here and I'm just listening to what's going on. And that's all I'm going to do." And I waited for any kind of reaction, and he stood there. I mean, I'm hearing the breathing. I know he's there. I feel it. I think he kind of just looked at me a bit, and he just decided, yeah, Greg's just sitting there. He's not doing nothing. He turns and he starts moving off down the mountain, and I heard him going. When he got down there a little bit, I turned, look into the darkness, and go, "Thank you," because I really meant it. Um, because when you have something that big, and he's somewhere in that 8-9 foot height range, weight would probably have to, I'm guessing, be somewhere around 1,000. To be in the presence of that will humble anybody. And that was probably the only time I kind of really felt apprehension, because of just how close he was to me, but I didn't feel fear. I just was kind of, oh boy, he's right here. And I wasn't about to turn and face him. I wasn't about to try and do anything that he would misinterpret in any way. And I think to this day, everybody's like, well, why didn't you? And I go, because I can't always promise everything's going to be peaceful, but if I can keep myself as non-threatening as possible, I think I'm going to be able to come out of everything as good as can possibly happen without having anything bad happen. And I really truly believe that more now based on that experience with him, because if they were truly dangerous to us, if they just decided they wanted to off humans for any random whim, he would have had the perfect opportunity right there with me. He could have, if that's really the kind of intent that they have and how they view us, but he didn't, and so here we are.
What about the difference, you going out alone versus you going out with anybody else? Do you have less activity?
It's funny. I can have encounters alone, and I have definitely had them with other people. And I can't say there's any rhyme or reason to it. I can't say I have more encounters being out solo. I probably have had more being solo just simply because I've been solo more often. But I have had some unreal experiences happen taking other people out there and then having it happen for a group of people. And the biggest one happened in 2013 when I made the rather regrettable decision to, quote, mess with Sasquatch, unquote. I have a friend of mine here in Southern Oregon that he's been with me on numerous outings. He helped me investigate a sighting that was reported to Cliff that we wound up finding the biggest footprint either one of us has ever seen out near Williams in Josephine County. But I had Tommy with me. I had a friend of mine, James Monson, whose dad has produced some Bigfoot movies, has written a book. James and I are still really good friends. We're working on things together, which will probably include a Bigfoot podcast of my own at some point. Anyway, James is there, and he's got a movie camera that's adapted to shoot in the dark, in starlight, and we had a perfect night for it with a lot of moonlight. So James is there. We had this couple with us, and they brought their dog. I kind of wanted to use the dog as bait. I wanted to see if leaving their dog in my truck and if it would start barking might help attract attention. So James is set up because he wants to try and get movie at night of one or them. And he's positioned near my truck and he's in a blind. The human eye, nobody would ever detect him. We leave the dog in the truck. The dog starts barking and doing exactly what I wanted it to do. Tommy took the wife with him and went down slope. I took the husband with me. We go up slope. We get up by my gate, because again, this is my research area. We're up by the gate that, stops you from being able to drive up. And I told Tommy, I said, here's what we're going to do. At 1:30, I'm going to do a Columbiana County howl. And then I want you to whoop back in response. And I want to see what kind of reaction we get. And Tommy's like, cool. Well, we didn't have radios, but we synchronized our watches. So we split up. The husband and I go uphill. Tommy and the wife go downhill. They follow this old spur road out. They get down. We get up. We get set where we wanted to be. And then we're sitting there and it's all quiet. And then I start hearing owls. And the guy who's with me, Chris, goes, are you hearing the rock knocks? I didn't hear the rock knocks. Every other person out there that night with me heard the rock knocks. I didn't hear the rock knocks. I could hear the owls going off. I just couldn't hear the rocks.
Now, how do you explain that? What do you think's behind that?
I don't know. And that happens a lot and sometimes you'll even see it in these shows. Somebody will hear something and then ask the person right next to them, do you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
And the person next to them, for whatever reason, doesn't hear it. It happens over and over again. I've had it happen repeatedly with me where I've heard something and then tell the person or people I'm with going, do you hear that? And they'll say no, or they'll go, wait a minute, I just heard. So I'm gonna finish this story I'm into, and then I'm gonna give you an example of a time when the two guys with me heard a whistle that I never even heard. And then all of a sudden I realize they've stopped and they're doing the RCA dog looking to the southwest of our position. But first I want to finish where I was at up in my research area. So we're sitting there and I look at my watch and I go, I got 2 minutes until I got to do my howl. All of a sudden I hear Tommy sound off. And I look at my watch, and Chris looks at his watch, and I go, what is he doing? And he goes, I don't know. And so at 1:30, I do my howl like I had planned on doing, but there's no response. And I'm like, that is really weird. Why did Tommy sound off early? Why was there no response to what I did? What's going on here? All of a sudden something told me, you need to get back to the truck. So Chris and I go back downhill. We get to the truck. Tommy and his wife are there. James is there. That's when I get the full story. Everybody starts talking about how they heard the rock knocks. Everybody's talking about how they heard the owls. And then Tommy, I said, why did you go early? And Tommy laughs and he goes, I didn't think I was going early. Here's what happened. Chris and I could not hear it. James heard it. Tommy, and I'm forgetting the name of Chris's wife. I apologize for this. Anyway, those three heard it. A Columbiana County type howl came off the bottom of the mountain. I was talking about Tommy and the wife went down the spur road. We're going up the main road to the gate. There's another spur road that takes off around the left and drops down towards the bottom of the mountain. Their Columbiana County howl comes up out of there. Tommy thought we had changed our plan for whatever reason. Remember, we're not carrying radios. And he thought I decided to get down here and make a howl. So he hears this howl, which is the howl he's expecting me to make. And he replied to it. Here's what wound up happening. Tommy has a first generation Starlight scope with him. He replied and he said, all hell broke loose below me. He said, I could hear trees cracking, snapping. I could hear brush popping. I'm looking through the scope. He said, I can see the tops of trees whipping around. The gal's sitting there. She's freaking out going, what's going on? What's going on? Tommy's like, I'm not sure. He says, I think we've got one coming right at us. Tommy's watching and he can hear this thing coming and he's watching the trees closer to him now, starting to whip and move and bend as something big is charging right up through it. And he goes, it was when I started feeling foot impact through the ground that I realized, I need to get out of here. And he turned and looked, and the gal that was with him was already gone. She was already running her butt off back to the truck. Tommy goes running back, and then he goes running up the spur road, and he said, I could feel that footfall. And he goes, it had to be like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. You know how you get that quiver? I mean, the big footfall. He said, it was loud. It was intense. And he goes, I go hauling ass back up to the truck. And I said, did you turn and look? He goes, I was afraid to turn and look. And I went, oh man, I said, okay, I wanted a response. I didn't want to piss him off. I said, Tommy, that was a bluff charge, because if he really wanted to catch you, he would have. But he was mad. He didn't like what we did. We disrespected him. He let us know we need to get out of here. And we did. And then I was kind of fearful that, maybe we blew the whole thing. Maybe what was special, I just ruined. Nope. When I went back in there 2 weeks later, let everything settle down, the first time I had interaction back with them, it was just like it was before. So my messing with Sasquatch thing, as I termed it, luckily for me, did not have a negative outcome in how they viewed me. So you're talking about, with firearms and things like that, yeah, I made a bad judgment call, but it didn't hurt, because I think they kind of understood. That's just the way that's going to be. The second thing I was talking about, where a whistle happened and I didn't even hear it, Tommy was also with me. I had another buddy, Jason, with me. Our point for being out that night wasn't Bigfoot, though. We were actually trying to locate a wolf that had been killing livestock in Ashland. And I was on the Jackson County Wolf Committee at that time. And we thought we knew where we needed to be to locate this wolf. So we'd gone out and I started making wolf howls, and Tommy and Jason both said, something's responding to the northeast, way off in the distance. And I look at Tommy and I said, wolf? And he goes, it's a howl, but it's way out there. I went, okay, well, let's try closing some distance. So we did. We moved in the direction of where that response was coming from. We get up on top into a better vantage point for hearing. I make wolf howls. We're getting a reply again, still to our northeast, but this time I heard it, but I go, man, I can't tell if that's a wolf or what it is, but something howled in response. In this area where I'm at right now, by the way, it's right up above Ashland, right off the dead Indian Memorial Road in the Green Springs Plateau area. And I'd never had a Bigfoot encounter in there. So I'm still believing I might have a wolf in the distance howling back at me. So we moved to another point to get me closer in that direction. And we're sitting there, and I'd made some howls, and we weren't getting any response at all. So we're standing there talking, and all of a sudden I saw Tommy and Jason both stop and look to the southwest, and they both cocked their head like the RCA dogs. And I'm like, what? And Tommy looked at me, he goes, you didn't hear the whistle? I go, what whistle? And then it whistled at us again. And that one I heard. I went, oh. And Tommy goes, right. And Jason goes, what's going on? And Tommy goes, we've got a Bigfoot right here. And so Tommy goes back to down the road to the west, and he's looking in the direction where the whistle came from. Jason has both a thermal and night vision capability, and I keep him with me at first, and I'm watching this open area because when Tommy moved back to the west, I wanted to see if something would go through the open area, hoping if it did, Jason right there with his toys, we'd be able to pick it up. So I'm watching Tommy, and he's looking to the south of the road, and he keeps looking and he's moving. And then all of a sudden I see him freeze. And I knew just by the way he was looking, he was seeing something. And I'm watching, and he comes scurrying back, and he goes, I just had one peeking at me. I just saw eye shine. I saw blue eye shine. I said, really? And he goes, yes. And I go, Jason, go with him. Get up there. See if you see anything through the therm or if you pick up anything on night vision. But guys, get back there. I then headed south off the road through this more open area because I wanted to try and cut it off if it tried to move east and get away from us. Gave us the slip. What it did was it then pushed to the south, and about another 500 yards, there was just this huge, just deep canyon. No way we could negotiate it. That thing went straight to that canyon and boom, gave us the slip. But I wasn't out there for a Bigfoot encounter. I wasn't trying to create one. This thing, I think, was hearing us. It was responding. And then when we got real close, it figured out exactly what we were. It saw us just kind of standing there, and it could have crept away in the darkness, but it didn't. It decided to have some fun with us, and it whistled at us. So that was the fun part. You have an encounter like that you weren't even planning on. You have somebody in your group actually get to see it, see eye shine. Way cool. And Jason, much like my buddy Jeff, no, not a believer going out, definitely a believer coming back. And I kept telling Jason, I still tell him to this day, I go, that's the greatest thing ever. We had a Bigfoot encounter, and I didn't even plan to have one. We just had it happen by sheer luck. It's one of those things that, again, we're blessed to be here in Southern Oregon. Things like that can happen, because we have an abundance of them here.
I mean, for the Bigfoot to be quote unquote, as I think was it Tommy that said it, he's right here. For it to be that close, and for you not to be able to hear the first whistle is so very strange, and just yet another strange aspect of these creatures.
And that reinforces the point I was saying earlier. I mean, you can have a whole group of people, and some people will hear something. Sometimes the whole group hears something. Sometimes some of the people hear something. Sometimes everybody but one person, which has included me on 2 occasions that I just described, I didn't hear what actually happened. Rock knocks in that incident in my research area, the first whistle. Then I heard the second whistle, and it was like, okay, but that first one, I didn't hear it, but Tommy and Jason definitely heard it.
Are there scenarios that you have heard, either friends of yours or on a podcast, that you're going, oh boy, I really wouldn't like that to happen to me because I feel like it would alter my enjoyment of the woods?
Yeah. And honestly, I listen to, these descriptions of these really hostile encounters, and especially now starting to hear more stories out of Alaska. I mean, for literally for decades, Alaska was virtually unknown on Bigfoot activity. I think the first person who kind of cracked open the door, if you will, that really made people start getting curious about Alaska and really looking into it was Les Stroud. Ironically enough, Finding Bigfoot started their entire series in Alaska. Even though it's the third episode shown, that was the first episode that they taped. It was up in Alaska investigating Prince Edward Island. But as time goes forward, I've heard far more stories and descriptions about really hostile encounters in Alaska than I am hearing from anywhere else. Not to say that we don't have them anywhere else. I mean, I've certainly had them happen here in Southern Oregon. I've investigated a real aggressive incident that happened to elk hunters up on Bessie Rock, where they had rocks the size of basketballs thrown at them, hitting trees right next to their head that literally caused cuts on their skin from the bark fragments flying off. I also had some guys that were hunting up near Union Creek in the Crater Lake National Park boundary. They had multiple Bigfoots escort them out of the woods, in a gentle way of putting that. And by escorting, I mean roars, growls, snarls, busting trees off, pushing trees over, telling these guys, get out of here and don't ever come back. And that message was made abundantly clear, because those guys would not even take me back to the exact spot where it happened. I went back to the area they described, took the road they described, where they believed they were, how far the incident unfolded over time. And yes, I did eventually discover some trees that were broken off and trees that had been pushed over. But again,
They wouldn't even take you out during the daytime.
No, they refused to go back.
Wow.
Same thing with those guys on Bessie Rock. I know people, and I've talked to people, they've had incidents. They absolutely will not go back to those locations, even in the middle of the day, refuse to.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a great example of that. Guy I know lives in Butte Falls. I'm going to change his name because he really doesn't like me talking about this story, but I have to. His name, I'm going to call him Fred. And this happened in, I'm going to say it was 1980, 81. But Fred and his girlfriend jumped in his dad's car and decided to go do boyfriend girlfriend stuff. And they drove down this road that gets right down there by Butte Creek. And Fred decided he needed to answer the call of nature before they started the shock absorber test. So he gets out of the car. He's standing there and he said, I heard something walking up towards me from the creek. And he said, as soon as I heard it walking, I knew it was on two legs. And he was like, there's no flashlight, there's no indication it's a person. And he goes, I'm finding this all really strange. And he says, I'm trying to listen, I'm trying to figure out what's going on, who it is. And then he said, all of a sudden, I'm aware of something standing right in front of me. And he goes, but it was so dark, I couldn't see anything. And he goes, so I started lifting my head. And he said, and then I looked up and there were these huge shoulders and there's this head. And this thing is looking right down at me.
Mm.
And he said, at first it was like, oh, and then he said, and then every instinct in my body said, run. And he said, I went flying back in that car, jump in the car. Girlfriend starts screaming, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And he goes, and I went tearing out of there. And he goes, I wanted to be where there were people, lots of people. Well, the Butte Falls High School basketball team was playing a game that night. They went straight to the gym. They go running into the gym. And every single person I talked to who saw him come in the gym that night all described him looking the same way. Absolutely white as a sheet, eyes popping out of his head, and he'd pissed his pants. Everybody all described the same thing. When I found that first footprint with my wife, where I did, I called him and said, "Hey, I want you to come out to Cowboy Ridge with me. I want to show you something." And he goes, "What do you want to show me?" And I started describing it, and he goes, "You found exactly what you think you found, and I'm not going anywhere near there with you." And this guy is a solid woodsman. This is another guy. You could take him out in the woods in the middle of the night and he could care less. And he's probably going to be able to navigate his way right back home. No GPS, no flashlight, no nothing. He's that kind of a guy. But Bigfoot totally unnerves him and he wants absolutely nothing to do with them. And he won't go anywhere where he thinks they might be at.
I mean, for him to, he probably didn't even realize that he had peed himself, and who could blame him, to be honest with you? But even if he had or hadn't, he still walked into the gym, and everybody sees this situation. Maybe they knew enough not to poke at him because they saw his face, like something really bad had happened to him.
Yeah, it was dramatic. He never really described the face at all. All he consistently described to me, and it took me a long time to finally earn his trust and get the full story out of him. It was such a powerful experience for him. He does not like talking about it. As I said, he doesn't like me talking about it, but I use it to illustrate, these kind of close range unexpected encounters, that it can be so powerful and dramatic that people will just never go in there again. He has not returned to that spot all these years since. He will not go back there, daytime, nighttime, whatever. And he is one of these people, and I've learned this through the research and listening to other people. He absolutely believes they use the waterways to help move around, both to navigate, to get water, to get food sources. And because, especially out here, and you've spent your time here, you know that water also means very thick brush and cover and places they can easily hide in. He he says, I do get very nervous being around our creeks up here.
What about stories of rogues, stories of particularly nasty Bigfoot that don't follow the MO of, we don't mess with the hairless things. If you do, it brings more hairless things, and we like to just be on our own. Do you think that there are situations where they are opportunistic ones and they might take a person?
Here's my belief on that, and this is both partially because of firsthand experience with my family group, and then being aware of the behavior of the family group to the north that I talked about, responsible for the Bessie Rock incident and that incident near Union Creek. That family group up there around Union Creek, I don't know that I want to have an encounter with them, because I have more hostile encounter reports from them than any other family group in Southern Oregon, and it isn't even close. And I describe them as being churlish and ill-tempered. So that family group at Union Creek, in that area, just like you have humans, the personality types, and some are pleasant and some are not. I firmly believe the same thing exists with everything. It's certainly going to exist with Bigfoot. And I think maybe partially, and especially in the case of Bigfoot, their interactions with human may help dictate that. And I don't have any way to tell you, yeah, this is why. And I can quote and I can cite. This is what I call a gut instinct feel. I just think you kind of become hardwired. And in humans, we call it prejudice. And I think you definitely will have some of them be far more prejudiced about a negative view of all humans, regardless, and they tend to react more strongly, more forcefully, more violently, if you want to use that word, on their encounters with humans. And I do believe that group that frequents the Crater Lake National Park, Union Creek Prospect area, They are probably more in that prejudice group to just universally treat humans as non-desirable and actually to try and remove them as fast and quickly as they can. My family group that I follow around near Butte Falls, I'm not the only one that knows about them. Plenty of people have encountered them. I have had eyewitness reports that, talk to people who definitely encountered my family group that I didn't say, oh, by the way, I've been following this group around, but yeah, tell me your story. Really, what happened? Okay. And give me some other background. What other kind of things were happening? Had you noticed or had you heard anything? And it's funny, there is definitely an elderly male in our family group that he is kind of more of that classic, what you hear, orange orangutan color. But he's an older male because in the brief looks we've had at him, we can see some gray mixed within that. We kind of got to the point where it's like we call him Grandpa. Well, Grandpa one day showed himself in broad daylight to a guy who had worked for BLM, Bureau of Land Management, for over 30 years. And of course, he'd heard all the stories. He didn't believe a lick of it until he and his son were coming back from a camping trip, and Grandpa walked right across the road in front of him. He crossed what is a major wide Forest Service road in 3 strides. And this guy was close enough. He described details about him. He said he turned, looked at him, and he goes, he had that jowly look. He goes, like an old man gets. And he goes, he kind of had those jowls. And he goes, and it was like an orang, but not, because his face wasn't dished in. He goes, it was amazing. And he goes, and I was immediately a believer. I mean, how can you not be? The thing's right there in broad daylight, and your son's seeing it, and you're not imagining things. And, I told him, I said, hey, look, I said, that was one time I revealed something. I said, that individual you're talking about, here's what I call him. I call him Grandpa. And I kind of gave him the reasons why. And he chuckled and he says, yeah, but that all fits. This guy had a far better look at him than I've ever had. So then a kind of curious thing happened. The guy goes, well, how can I see him again? Oh, you really want to? Well, this is important for everybody to know, because you can do things to help position yourself to have an encounter if you really want to have one. Well, first of all, you got to know or have a pretty good idea of where to find them. And the Bigfoot mapping project, God bless Eric. I mean, I'll tell you what, that thing is a game changer beyond all game changers, because now you've got the entire database of reports to various sources, BFRO, John Green. All these archives from over the years have been compiled, and you can look at any spot, see any level of activity. But the things you want to be looking for is, what time of the year have these happened? What time of the year is it when you're going to be going out? Where are the closest sightings at? And even if they're not close, if you basically can be on a straight line between sighting reports or be in the middle of a cluster, that is a hint and a half that that's where you need to be if you've got the time of the year right, because these things do definitely move around. Sometimes it's really migratory and sometimes it isn't, but they tend to move through specific areas at certain times of the year. And I know this is driven by food. My main research area, I can go into that thing from the end of July through the middle of September and know they're going to be there because of the berries. There's 6 different types of berries up there, not even counting the manzanita, and they utilize them all for food sourcing. There's this belief, and I keep hearing it expressed, they're apex predators and they're predatory. No, they're omnivores. They're like bears and like us. And they will eat the meal that is the easiest to acquire, requiring the least amount of energy burn to do that. By the way, another animal just like that, everybody thinks a wolf is a constant killing machine. Wolves are not constant killing machines. They are constant scavenging machines, but if the opportunity for a kill comes along, they will do it. Bigfoot is the same way. I do believe they are more predatory at this time of the year and in the winter because they need more protein and they need that energy to help keep them warm. But to build up body reserves, literally build up fat, they will tend to be far more omnivore than they will ever be, I mean, herbivore than they will ever be carnivore because there's very little risk to them. Trying to kill a deer and an elk, well, as humans think that's real easy to do because of rifles and arrows and other things. It's not that easy, and there's a lot of risk for any predator. I mean, things can go wrong. A big bull elk here, in terms of weight, isn't that far off from what your average Bigfoot is going to be. And in the case of females and juveniles, a bull elk weighs a lot more than they do, has those antlers, has those hooves, and so they undertake risk going out to kill something. Smaller things, squirrels, that kind of stuff, I don't even consider that because okay, all they got to do is dig them out. Well, bears do it, they do it, but I mean turning deliberately predatory on deer and elk, things of that nature. I do not believe for even 1 second they do that year round, and that's the focus of what they do. It's just different times of the year they will do it, and probably that's because the other natural food sources become more diminished because of winter, and they again they need that protein, they need that energy to be able to sustain themselves in those colder months. And then another consistent thing that they do, going after the marrow, they tend to kill and go after all the protein rich organs, and then they're going after marrow, and they leave a lot of muscle mass tissue meat behind. And I truly believe that's part of the relationship with coyotes that they have. The coyotes follow them knowing they're going to get a great meal because the Bigfoot, when it kills something, it's very specific organs, especially the liver, all the really protein packed things, the marrow and the bones, and they will leave a lot of meat behind them. And coyotes, I think they've picked up on that, and coyotes tend to, this whole relationship that definitely exists. The coyotes may help serve as, a warning sign, alerting them to danger they may not have picked up on. But the coyotes definitely benefit from all of that meat. Wolves may benefit too. I'm still really trying to understand the dynamic between wolves and Bigfoot. I think, a much better feel on how that dynamic works between Bigfoot and coyotes because coyotes just are not any threat. What I find interesting is Bigfoot and coyotes do have a close relationship, but Bigfoot and dogs, domesticated dogs, that's a whole different thing. And one of the first things I tell people that if you want to have a Bigfoot encounter, leave your dogs at home. Don't take them because Bigfoot, if they don't get outright angered by dogs, they will certainly be annoyed by them because, in their various ways of concealing themselves, dogs will still bust them. And I'm not talking anything like cloaking, I'm just talking about the simple fact they know how to use the landscape to conceal themselves. Think of that end of Harry and the Hendersons, where the family's right there in plain view, but you don't see
Mm-hmm.
them in plain view until they start moving. They can do that. We as humans may not be able to pick up on it because of our sensory limitation, but a dog can nail them every time. And so I think Bigfoot just in general avoids dogs because of they spot them, and that yapping and barking, yeah, they don't like that. There's not a lot of humans, honestly, that really enjoy listening to a dog barking, yapping, yelping, doing all that stuff endlessly. And so it gets on their nerves. They don't like it. So leave your dogs at home if you want to go out and have an encounter. Second thing you leave at home, all your electronics. I do not go out there with cameras, with all of this stuff. Even though we had that one encounter with Jason and he had the therm and all of that, I don't take electronics. And I picked up on the fact they're aware of electronics and don't. I don't pretend to understand how I know they're picking up on it, but they're picking up on it. So I have never carried electronics with me. And people walking around in the woods, holding up cameras, holding up video, film crews out shooting, all of that puts them off. Bob and Roger caught lightning in a bottle. And the only way that happened was because they were on horseback and Patty heard the horses and she did not hear them because Bob said they were not talking, they were just riding along. And so she heard the horses. She probably smelled the horses. The horse smell covered the smell of Roger and Bob. And then when she did realize Roger and Bob were there, well, Bob is one of the very, very few people ever outside of Paul Freeman that actually had the right equipment at the right time in the right place. And it blows my mind that there are still people to this day, including Bigfoot people, that say that's a hoax. There is no way that is a hoax. That thing doesn't even move like a human in any kind of a suit. And especially in 1967, go look at the original Planet of the Apes. That was the cutting edge for the ape look. And that Patty doesn't look anything like that. And then Rick Baker, who did Harry for Harry and the Hendersons, he weighed in on it and he talked about Patterson Gimlin and he said, I could do that now. That technology did not exist in 1967. And he said, and even now, to do it would be so expensive. The only people who really could afford it would be Hollywood studios and the US government.
That's another good hint. No dogs. If you happen to have horses, take those puppies out there with you, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there you go.
horses do not alarm them. And actually, horses will help disguise your presence.
Mm-hmm.
And also, people who are horse people, you're a lot calmer with horses. So again, it's what are you projecting into the universe? The other thing to do not camp wide out in the open. Do not camp in campgrounds. My camp spot I talk about, my research area, trees, brush, everything all right up against it. They can approach me, get right next to me if they wanted to, and I wouldn't know they were there unless they wanted to reveal the presence they were there. So don't go camp out and be out. Get yourself next to the tree lines, in the brush, places where, quite frankly, I think a lot of people would feel uncomfortable. No bright lights, definitely nothing like trail cams, definitely not any kind of electronics. They pick up on all of that. You want to make it inviting. Another way to help, and it was presented in Finding Bigfoot, and Bobo talked about it, but they kind of made it a joke, but it's true. Cook bacon, cook hamburger, cook things that release these odors that they're going to find appealing and go, I think I might want to go check that out, but allow them the ability to check it out where they can approach concealed and in cover and then leave gifts. I'm fully believe in doing this. I leave mylar balloons. I have left stuffed animals. I leave jars of peanut butter. And what I do with the peanut butter, I will actually knife puncture the lid, but I leave it down and I leave it sealed because I want just enough odor to get out. And then I put them up in trees to help make it far less likely that a bear is going to find it. And you start leaving gifts out and be welcoming, and they will definitely accept it and they'll return sometimes. They don't return gift you every time, it doesn't happen that way. But the other thing that does happen when you do that, it does help build the relationship. It does help them realize that you're being friendly with them, that you're acknowledging them, and you actually come bearing gifts. Why mylar balloons? Because I think their kids are absolutely fascinated by them. Stuffed animals, same thing. I truly believe that.
All right. So before we get to Sam Elliott, just one final question about Bigfoot. And I think it's really probably the biggest question that gets asked about Bigfoot. And you're not going to know the answer for sure, but I would like to hear your theory on what they are.
My this is so interesting. My belief as to what they are. I think, Les Stroud is somebody that probably comes the closest. You go into it thinking one thing, you start believing the wood ape thing, and then you start becoming aware of everything that they are and what they can do, and you quickly realize these are not just apes, because if they were that, we would have already caught one. The more I dwell into this, the more things came out, like Melba Ketchum's first DNA study that it seemed like everybody laughed at except me, where, she basically stated they were from another world, and that's, everybody starts to woo people and Chewbacca. Jeff Meldrum, thank God he's recovering, but Dr. Jeff definitely thinks these are descendants of primeval humans, early scale humans. And if you have any kind of a belief in God, you know that there was a battle in heaven and Satan and his followers lost and they were cast out. Well, everybody knows Satan and the devil, but what people don't realize is there was a name given to his followers that were cast out: Nephilim. Nephilim then would be of not of this world. Nephilim would have amazing abilities to disappear and appear. They would have vocal abilities that we now know from analyzing Bigfoot vocalizations. Vocal specialists will tell you it is not a single vocal cord as we have as humans, it is multiples. The Bible describes, and there's been descriptions given of Lucifer while he is still in heaven being able to sing four-part harmony by himself. That sounds absolutely impossible if you do not believe in God and you're not open to this, but it would explain how we listen to some of these recordings and you will hear a Bigfoot make vocal changes, change pitch, change octaves, do things that no human being could do, can produce a mix of sounds all at once, go from a howl to a scream to this. I mean, you listen to those tapes that Jim did in Michigan, you listen to these tapes of these recordings out of Minnesota, and the changes within the call being made and the octave and the range and everything else. I am far more open to the idea that what we're dealing with here are the ancestry of Nephilim breeding with those earliest humans that were significantly bigger than we were pre Noah's flood. There's documentation of that. They could live to be 1,000 years. Methuselah, example of that. There are a lot of things that we've lost as humanity that we just can't hardly wrap a human mind around. That the more I'm exposed to looking at what they're doing, that just makes me go, apes don't do that, gorillas don't do that, chimps don't do that, orangs don't do that. If they were just apes, we should be seeing some of this everywhere else. Lemurs can produce a sound pretty close to in terms of how it changes in pitch and octave, but it still doesn't exactly match what we've heard from them. So, yeah, I am definitely warming up and becoming a bigger subscriber to the belief that these are the downline descendants of Nephilim that interbred with the earliest humans, the pre flood, the antediluvians, as they're referred to. It makes a lot of sense out of things. And even though Dr. Jeff doesn't come right out and say it, over the years since I've been following him, his position is definitely evolving to these are relic hominids, but he won't define the relic of what. I'm far more willing to do that. I don't know the why, the where, the how they would have survived through the flood, all of that. There's questions I can't give you answers to, but based now on taking it from that approach, it makes far more sense out of things that have happened to me that I have heard recorded and other people have described, because it takes a supernatural something that I think to pull this off, because we just don't find the abilities that they have present as a complete package anywhere else. And if they were simply a creature, yeah, I think we would be able to point and look. I mean, there's elements, the infrasound. Crocodilians make it, elephants make it, rhinos make it, even the big cats can infrasound. There are a lot of things that can infrasound. There are a lot of things that can produce eye shine, especially cave dwelling creatures. But having it all wrapped together the way they have it to be able to produce the sounds that they do, the way that they do, okay, if you're going to say I've walked clear off the dark side cliff here and you're not going to follow me, I guess. But nobody knows for sure what these things are. And that means every possibility should be on the table, because if this is really about science, real science, you don't close anything. You leave all possibilities open while you're searching for defining what this is. And that's another reason why, you know, again, if they're apes, this all would have been concluded by now. Certainly with the level of intensity that's been poured into this since 1994. I'm gonna give some credit to Matt and BFRO for kind of being that first big organization that really developed, and maybe they were the only one I was aware of, but okay, fine. But since 1994 to now, with the amount of what's been going on out there, yeah, I would have to believe we would have caught one, we would have had this, we would have conclusive, yep, we know, and we don't. And, Les said it perfect. I went into this looking for answers, and the further I get into this, the more questions I have. Yeah, I can totally understand that.
I 100% agree that we have to keep an open mind when it comes to these things, because we don't know what they are. We don't know what they're capable of. We're getting little hints and little dribs and drabs of information. And that's why I think it's so important that anybody that has any experiences should share them with somebody that collates this stuff,
Exactly. And I will definitely agree with those I have heard say this next point. The US government knows far more about them than they are letting on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any doubt of that. I've had too many good eyewitness descriptions of government things, and I've read a lot of accounts of government things. I think everybody who's even remotely interested in Bigfoot that's spent any time looking into it is aware of what was reported at Mount St. Helens after the eruption, with Chinook helicopters and other heavy lift helicopters flying out of that thing with big nets underneath them, loaded with big hairy bodies in them. I think a lot of people are familiar with the incident that happened on the wildland fire in northern Nevada in the Ruby Mountains, where firefighters found a very badly injured, burned Bigfoot, reported it to Incident Command, and in short amount of time, the black Suburbans and government guys showed up, and they chased everybody off, and that injured Bigfoot disappeared. I don't doubt that at all, and especially in light of how aggressively the government suppressed the UFO situation for the decades that they did, and now they finally have acknowledged that. So we have that.
All right, Greg, Sam Elliott time. And this is not going to be, and just to preface this is just to speak about how wonderful he is. This is not some, he saw Bigfoot or anything like that. So, but I would highly encourage people to stay tuned in, because it's Sam Elliott. He played in, of course, Roadhouse and Tombstone and many others, but those are two of my probably, maybe even top 5 in the top 5 movies. So Sam Elliott is in both of those. If people don't like those movies, we can't be friends. But sorry.
Agree 100%.
But
you can also throw Mask in there too, because
of course
his role playing Cher's boyfriend in Mask, unbelievable. And of course, Eric Stoltz. If you just enjoy excellent acting, you need to watch that movie, because the acting levels in that movie for Sam, for Cher, for Eric, off the charts good. It's just exceptional to watch people working at the top of their craft, and in that movie they do.
Absolutely.
So, how I met Sam Elliott, it was a completely fluke thing. I didn't know I was meeting him. What happened was, I was a member of the Redmond, Oregon Fire Department in 1994. And here in Oregon, we were starting to learn the lessons about creating defensible space around properties to help them better withstand wildland fires. And buddy of mine who was in the department was working in public works down in Sun River, a resort community south of us. And, few people are probably familiar with Sun River. And he said, "Hey, I got a side project. There's a guy that owns some property here that he wants to create defensible space, but he's also wanting to make sure he keeps his privacy from the golf course." I went, "Oh, okay." And he looked at me and he goes, "Well, I'd like you to be part of this," because he goes, "You got all that landscape knowledge, plus he goes, you're the saw guy for cutting trees down and that stuff." And he said, "You want to come out and help me?" He goes, "I think this would probably be about a 3-day job." I said, "Sure." He didn't even tell me who it was that owned the property. So on the day we're supposed to start work, we drive down to Sun River. We pull up in front of this house out there off the golf course, and he knocks on the door. The door opens up, and Sam Elliott standing right in front of me. And this is right coming out of Tombstone, by the way. I have been lucky to, in my life, I worked for the Oakland A's organization here in Medford when they had a farm team, worked for Bill Graham Presents in Sacramento. I've been around a lot of celebrity people. I don't get starstruck except that time. Because Sam Elliott, I mean, my mom had adored him since the early days. She thought he was the most gorgeous man ever. I mean, I knew who this guy was, and I'd just seen Tombstone, and now Sam Elliott standing right in front of me. Bob's introducing, and I'm like shaking, and I'm holding my hand out, and I'm going, "Mr. Elliott, it is such an honor." And he goes, "Please." Holds his hand up in that Sam voice, and I know you can hear it. "Please call me Sam." And that's how it started. And then we told him and described what we were going to do. We went out, we walked the property, and he just reiterated, "I just want to be able to keep something here to screen us from the people coming by on the golf course." And I went, "Great, I think we can accomplish it." So we go to work, and it was indeed a 3-day project. Over the course of that 3 days, Sam bought us lunch every day, had cold beers waiting for us every day. And when we were at lunch and when we were just chilling at the end of the day, drinking beers, he told some of the greatest stories about Tombstone. He was talking about how, everybody showed up with facial hair, and it was almost like a competition to see who could get the best look. He talked about how they were constantly pulling practical jokes on the set, and in that Sam voice going, "That doggone Kurt and that doggone Bill, they tried to outdo themselves over who'd come up with the best prank." He goes, "It's like a couple of youngsters, those two. They were always up to something." Then he talked about Val Kilmer and about him being Doc. And he said, Val showed up on that set as Doc, and he never quit being Doc until that movie was done. He was really proud of the fact that the research that was done to, as accurately as possible, historically represent what Tombstone was like at that time. He goes, they were meticulous. The firearms we were carrying and using, the clothes, so much of it, everything was a very detailed replication of what would have happened back in those days. And then he talked about how Kurt really saved that movie because Kevin Yare, who wrote it, was supposed to direct it, and the studio just didn't really feel comfortable handing him the movie to direct it because he'd never really done anything like that. Great script writer, but everybody who came to that movie came to it because of Kevin, and Kevin drew them into it, and suddenly he's out. They all kind of wondered what they were going to do. And he said it was Kurt that rallied them, and it was Kurt that saved the movie. And they brought in George P. Cosmatos, who had done some big movies. He'd done, Rambo. He'd done some of these other things. The studio had great belief in him and what he could do, but he didn't connect with the cast. At the end of the day, that movie was really directed by and created by Kurt Russell. And George P. Cosmatos got what he got, won the awards that he won, largely because of the work of Kurt Russell taking it on as a passion work and deciding, no, Kevin's done excellent work here. This story is magnificent. It needs to be told. We're going to do it. So Sam made it very clear that the real hero of the movie, in terms of it even getting done and getting to the world, is Kurt Russell. And he said, and he never got nearly the amount of credit he should for that, for what he did to even get Tombstone to us. So it was pretty amazing. And then just, I mean, as gracious as he could be. I mean, I just quickly mentioned he had got lunch for us every day. He had beers waiting for us. I mean, he truly was as gracious a guy as you'll ever hope to meet. And you certainly would never expect it coming from an A-list celebrity like him. And you and I were talking before we got rolling on this. I don't know what it is about Oregon. Sam's an Oregon guy. There's a real genuine thread of people who truly are from Oregon, especially that older Oregon. There was something about this place that helped produce some exceptional people, and Sam just happened to be one of them. And I will forgive him for making the man who killed Hitler and then the Bigfoot. I do not watch the end of that movie, the Bigfoot part, but the first part of that movie, the killing Hitler part, I am very interested in because it's documented historical fact. There were multiple attempts on Hitler's life, both from within the German government, and you see that illustrated in Valkyrie. And then reading through the history books, Erwin Rommel, who at one time was Hitler's favorite general, paid the ultimate price because he decided enough was enough and he was trying to remove him, and he got found out in one of those plots. So the idea that the US had this special agent guy, kind of a World War II James Bond, if you will, managed to infiltrate all the way in and pull off the execution of Hitler, the historian buff in me, just that appealed to no end. And that Sam was involved, and Sam played the older version of that guy. That first part of that movie detailing that, I love it. The Bigfoot stuff is horrifically bad. It's pretty clear nobody with any real knowledge was brought in as a consultant. It's terrible. Like I said, I'll forgive Sam for that. And in that sense, I truly, to this point right now, I think the best movie portrayal of Bigfoot that I have seen, even though it's over the line in some ways, is still Harry and the Hendersons, because they do get more right than they got wrong. But the biggest thing they got wrong is that they're militant vegetarians. They absolutely are not. They're omnivores. And hey, Harry would sit right down for a steak dinner right alongside the Hendersons. So that part, wildly inaccurate. But living in a family group, being able to use just what's right there with the woods to conceal, and you could look right at them and never even see them and understand what you were looking at. That's all very true. I mean, there is a lot of good elements about it. Do I believe it would be possible for a Bigfoot in humans to have that kind of relationship? I don't want to say no, because even here in Southern Oregon, I have heard some pretty remarkable stories about things very close to that happening.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your experiences with Sam. All I know is I need to once we get off the call, I'm going to go down and throw Tombstone on, even just so it's on in the background. Makes me happy. But now, let everybody
by the way, real quick, I mentioned Valkyrie and I mentioned Tom Cruise. While Sam was just the most wonderful of guys possible, my friend Bob, who was in public works down there, he got to experience the less than good side of Tom Cruise. Tom and Nicole and a whole bunch of other people showed up, and they were renting a property in Sun River, and a winter storm was coming in, and they had snowmobiles. And they had a double-decker snowmobile trailer. They were pulling behind this big Hummer and everything. And when they checked in, they were warned, if major snow develops, we are going to plow the road, and there will be a berm, but we are not going to plow the driveways. We're not going to do the sidewalks. That's on you. Well, sure enough, the storm hits. 6 o'clock in the morning, the phone's ringing at Public Works. Bob picks it up. and it is Tom Cruise, and he is livid. He is melting the phones down. He's screaming obscenities. He's mad because there's this big berm at the end of the driveway. And Bob said, I tried to interrupt him a couple times. Said, Mr. Cruise, look at your property agreement. It is stated right there. Eventually Bob and another guy had to go out there and get rid of that berm. And do you think they got any better treatment for coming out and doing something they really weren't supposed to do? Nope. They were screamed and cussed at pretty much the entire time until they got it done. And then Tom and everybody jumps in their vehicles, and he said he literally went flying out of here. And Bob was like, if I never see that guy again, it would still be too soon.
Yeah, that's a bummer to hear about someone that I've been watching since I was young. You know, you like to hear the good stories like Sam.
Yes. Now that I say that, it all of a sudden clicks in my head. Now, here's the important point to understand. Bigfoot, you got some that are going to be Sam Elliott, and you got some that are going to be Tom Cruise. Your approach to them may help you have more of a Sam Elliott than having a Tom Cruise.
But sometimes they're always just going to be Tom Cruise no matter what,
exactly.
right?
Yep, exactly.
You can go out and plow all you want, but they're not going to appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right. So, Greg, thank you so much for the time today. Let everybody know where to find you and how to contact you if you want them to.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on it going into this. Southern Oregon Bigfoot Seeker on Facebook. That's my Bigfoot blog. I don't have a website yet. You heard me allude to a podcast. We may be getting to that, and then we do that. Maybe there'll be other things to support it. But for right now, you got to go to Facebook and get Southern Oregon Bigfoot Seeker.com. Dig down through there. There's a lot of stuff in there. I do document what we just found when we went out for deer season, not in my research area, but just to the east of it, where we found a Bigfoot territorial marker. And I made a video of that. And then we go back in there a couple days later, and there's another marker done. But a friend of mine that, he's like, hey, they did the second one because they know you found the first one. And they're like, oh, if he likes that, he'll really like this. So my hunting buddy who's with me, where we found those, we now literally, that part of the road, we call that Tree Break Hill because it's right up at the top of a hill. And you see the videos, and I'm going to make the case why I know these are Bigfoot markers. And I also will indicate these are more subtle signs that I think the average person would see. And if they really, truly didn't know what they were looking at, they would dismiss it offhand immediately.
Talking to you just makes me miss the woods so much as I am sitting here in the desert. Makes me sad. I'm not anywhere near the woods.
Hey, I've said it before. I'll say it again. I am, from a Bigfoot point of view, I'm in heaven. Mm-hmm. I couldn't ask to be in a better spot to have them in numbers, in great habitat, that they are in year round, that there is a long history of them being here. So we know they love everything about the area. The only thing that surprises me a little bit is that Southern Oregon, Jackson, Josephine, Douglas counties, they are not bigger, quote unquote, hot spots in the greater Bigfoot world. There's far more attention to the south with Willow Creek, obviously. There's more attention up north with the Olympics and all of that. And we kind of sit here in perfect terrain. And you heard what I said that Bart said about my research area. He said, this is the best habitat I've seen outside of the Olympics. And we're just lucky. We have hundreds of thousands of acres of that all around us here, with a big population that is active and present year round.
Such a beautiful area. Yeah. But Greg, you're welcome back anytime. Thank you so much. You were a wonderful guest.
Oh, thanks, Shannon. As soon as you were going, hey, I'm looking for people to do this, I thought, I know, Shannon, we're friends with a lot of mutual people, and all I've ever heard was great things about you. And I thought I'd reach out because, I don't want to be egotistical about it. And I think you'll believe this now. I truly feel like I've had things happen, and I bring a perspective that I just don't hear very many other people discussing out there. And I thought it might be important to kind of share these things.
Absolutely. I mean, your perspective on things is extremely important, especially as you say, when trying to do the research, you have to look at time of year, what's available to the Bigfoot, and
Yep.
going out there with not only an open mind, but knowing your limitations and knowing maybe when you actually should listen to the quote unquote the voice in your head, right? No matter what that might
Right.
be, even if it's your inner primal instinct going, hey, maybe just come back another time. Things aren't good.
Yeah, and you definitely know when to hit the eject and move out of an area, and I illustrated that. But the biggest thing too is always approach with respect. Don't believe you're superior. We're not. We're not superior to them. In a lot of ways, we're not even superior to rats, mice, and squirrels scurrying around out there. They're far better able to adapt and exist on the landscape than your average human. But when you take it right, when you have the right frame of mind, and when you are respectful and you're right place, right time, really good things can happen for you.